So Churchill and his dad weren't close at all. His dad would send him letters when he was in school, and Churchill was often in the bottom set, which is ironic because he ends up self-educating himself and reading a ton of books and ending up being very intelligent and having a wide range of knowledge that he uses to his advantage. But he wasn't a good student, which is often found in a lot of outliers. They're not amazing students. They don't like being told what to do. They want to be in control. But then after school or during their own time, they end up reading loads and educating themselves. But his dad used to send him like horrible letters, basically saying he was a failure and he would disregard Churchill. And that definitely probably put a lot of fire in Churchill's belly to prove him wrong. But alas, he didn't end up being able to prove him wrong when Lord Randolph was alive. This is quite a common thread in a lot of outliers and highly successful people like Steve Jobs. Winston, it is true, complained of periodic dark moods, which he called the black dog. But these were occasioned by actual reverses and were soon dispersed by vigorous activity. And his health actually ended up being in full possession of his faculties despite his mind. Even though he physically became worse when he got older, his mind ended up being still really sharp even up until his death. But yeah, he had huge passion for life in all aspects. His aim to be the most important politician in Westminster was a male projection of his mother's intense desire to be the most desirable lady in Mayfair. So his mother was American. Paul Johnson says she was also very much an American. She believed the sky was the limit, that everything was possible. That tradition precedes the right way of living or acting that could always be ignored when ambition demanded. She loved high risk and did not weep, for long anyway, if they did not come off. And she transmitted all of this in her firstborn son, Winston. So, yeah, Churchill definitely didn't act like a Victorian British man. He was very much more like Teddy Roosevelt, the famous American president, who will be doing future episodes on. And I think that is really important because the influence his mother had on him and the kind of nature he had went against the grain. And although he got a lot of resistance for acting this way, it ended up benefiting him greatly because he was scared to take risk and didn't loathe in a lot of criticism and just kept getting on with it. And I think it's still the case. There's definitely still tall poppy syndrome in the UK where the tallest poppy gets its head cut off. Don't stand out. Don't try and do things differently. It's very cynical. And I think the UK would be a lot better without it. I know that America is the opposite of that. They encourage everyone to try and do great things, or a lot of people to do great things. That's how they're brought up there, which obviously has its negatives as well. But not enough people in the UK try and stand out and try and be great, even though they could easily be. And Winston is a physical example of that. So I think we should all have that outlier mentality where we actually believe we can be something and do something before we actually achieve it, because belief comes before ability. And once you have physical proof that you are who you believe you are, that's when you'll prove everyone wrong. But in the meantime, you just have to keep believing, I can do this and I can be the best. And that's exactly what Winston Churchill did, even though he went through many ups and downs in his career, which we'll get into. His father soon wrote him off as an academic failure, and he never got out the bottom form. Lord Randolph's letters to him are crushing, indeed brutal. So that's what I was saying earlier about his dad being incredibly harsh to him for not doing well in school. Yeah, so Winston Churchill was born in aristocracy. He had a long family lineage of kind of successful people, but that was mainly attributed to, I think he's called like the Duke of Marlborough, who was like one of the best army generals in British history. He like never lost a battle, and that ended up providing like status for generations after him, including Churchill's. When Churchill's dad died in 1895, all had to be sold to pay his debts. It was clear by then that Winston would have to earn his own living. So he didn't actually have a lot of financial backing throughout his life, and he ended up being really hit hard by the 1920s financial crisis and the Great Depression, and lost all of investments. But luckily he had writing and speaking as one of his true kind of gifts, in life, which made him a substantial income, but he never really inherited much money, which probably a lot of people didn't realize. They'd probably just think, oh, Churchill, he's from an aristocratic family. He didn't try hard, but it's the complete opposite. Whilst a lot of people in that status level at the time and probably now didn't do much with their lives, Churchill was the complete opposite. He said about that there's wastrels at both ends of the scale, which is interesting. That it just shows how important hard work is. No matter what class you're in, no matter what cards you're dealt, you still have to work hard and have a purpose in life. Otherwise, you'll just end up regretting being lazy. Yeah, so it says words were also his main source of income throughout his life from the age of 21. Yes, this is incredible. He wrote thousands of articles for newspapers and magazines and over 40 books. Some were very long. His account of the Second World War is over 2,050,000 words. Yeah, wrote between 8 and 10 million words. And there can be very few boys who made such profitable use of something learned at school. In that sense, Winston's education, contrary to the traditional view, was a notable success. So yeah, he just worked on his strengths, which was writing for him, and ended up making a substantial income from it. As for us, if photography's strength, or if speaking's our strength, or if creating content's our strength, just hone in on that and try to make a business out of it, try to make money from it, because you'd rather be doing that than be doing a job you hate, right? So that's what Churchill did, and I think that's what a lot of creative people should try to do more of. Try to make a career out of their passion. Yeah, so he was really interested in war. He wanted to win medals. He wanted the prestige of a successful soldier. And then he would use that success to pivot into politics and end up being the prime minister. So he had a blueprint, he had a game plan right from the start, Winston Churchill did. And he ended up being a war correspondent in quite a few wars and also fighting in a lot of them. And the author says he was under fire, I calculate, about 50 times in the course of his life and never once hit by a bullet. And he was not the only outsider who came to Cuba for experience. Theodore Roosevelt, his older contemporary, led a force of freebooters there. The two men had a great deal in common, but did not get on. Roosevelt said, "That young man Churchill is not a gentleman. He does not rise to his feet when a lady enters the room." That may be true. Once Churchill was comfortably in his chair, he was reluctant to rise, part of his conservation of energy principle. So there's a lot of parallels between Teddy Roosevelt and Winston Churchill. And I think we're definitely going to be doing some episodes on Teddy Roosevelt, because a lot of different biographies I've been reading, like Bob Dylan's and Edward Box, which we'll be doing episodes on in the next few weeks, have mentioned Teddy Roosevelt. And his maxim is get action. And I think he's probably one of the greatest presidents in US history. So the fact that Churchill's being compared to him shows that he's like the real deal. He really is an outlier. Ends up going to India, and he says once in India, he looked about him for action, but he was not idle while waiting for opportunities.